A Clearer View on Love is a relationships podcast for women with clarity coaches Lucy Bainbridge and Joe Monday, helping you be your true self in all your romantic interactions.
Right, hello and welcome to the third edition of Clearer View on Love. And today we're addressing the subject, why do I keep attracting Mr. Wrong even though I'm growing massively as a person? Someone wrote in about this and there's so much to say on this Mr. Wrong thing. I totally relate to this because Mr. Wrong for me has always been someone who is wild and in some way unavailable and uncommitted and will treat me badly, but has an incredible kind of intoxicating power, which is almost like a drug to me. I mean, I had one particular Mr. Wrong that I obsessed over for ages. And then after that, no one was ever as Mr. Wrong as him, but I did seem to have a typical destructive relationship with men that were in some way unable to commit or had problems. And I really think about this. I mean, there's two ways to think about it. For me, since I have changed as a person, it's not that I don't attract people who are... Okay, so for me, it was always wildly around drugs and drink and party animals and people with, not very big interest in doing well for themselves. We're just more interested in escaping life. So it's not that I don't meet those people, but because I'm not in those situations anymore, and because I'm not attracted to it anymore because it's not who I am anymore. But when it comes to commitment, meeting someone who is committed and wants to be in a relationship, the way I see life, I do think life mirrors back to you where you're at. So if you're attracting the wrong guy, this is just one look at it, but I kind of see it that because I'm attracting a different kind of guy now, I don't think I'm ready to commit to a relationship. So I kind of meet people who are the same and I attract those kind of people too. But the other thing about Mr. Wrong, I'm not worried about attracting Mr. Wrong anymore because I don't feel threatened that Mr. Wrong can touch my psychological well-being. So I'm not really at the moment in a place of looking out for a guy to complete me, to make up for areas to connect with because I need that love. So I'm not really bothered whether someone's right or wrong because I can trust myself so much more to not get sucked in by something that's clearly not going to be very good for me. So that's my first dose of wisdom on the subject. Joe, what do you think?
I love that, what you're saying, Lucy. I think what I loved about what you're saying is the idea that Mr. Wrong can't actually touch your psychological well-being anymore. What came to mind when you were saying that was that the vulnerability or the apparent perception of vulnerability that somehow that person can be right and that person can be wrong, and Mr. Wrong can fuck up my life and Mr. Right can make it all great again, and almost like the fragility of that, the fragility that comes across when I think of that is that you as a woman are at the mercy of the behaviour of someone else, absolutely at the mercy of them, and they can behave in a way that will either like really destroy you or it'll make your life complete. And both of those things are an illusion. Both of those things, you're giving more power to that person than they have the ability to give you, because they literally, they can't actually manipulate your experience of the world in the way that you believe that they can. As in, and we've talked about this before, haven't we, Lucy? And we'll kind of like keep coming back to it, because it kind of seems like a trivial point, but it and if you think you kind of know this, but it's not changing your life, and you're still attracting these guys, then I would say you don't know it, because knowing this is actually life changing. We've both seen that, is that actually all your experience is coming to you via thought. Thought is the only way you can experience life, and because of that you are always free, and you're always free from circumstance, whatever that circumstance is. And an example of that is, for example, a previous Mr. Wrong, say like a bad breakup with a guy or something that you were completely devastated about, and then you might see him a year later or something, and then you think, oh, why was I bothered about him? And there's literally no emotion about that person. It's very neutral. And I know I've experienced this time and again. I've got myself in knots about someone, and then I see them having, separated from them for a while or whatever, and then it's just like, I literally couldn't be less interested if I tried. And that's the same person with the same behaviour, with the same everything, except your interpretation of that person has completely changed. Your experience has completely changed because your thinking about that person has changed. We're all living in kind of separate realities, thought-generated separate realities, and that reality is changing moment to moment. We are living in our thinking moment to moment. We don't know when that's going to change, but it's changing all the time.
Yeah, I think, God, there's so many levels of misunderstanding behind the Mr. Wrong thing. It's like, first of all, we're labelling someone. I mean, it's kind of too general, actually, isn't it? It's like, if I just give my example of how I unpick my own perception of my own Mr. Wrong, that I think that will help. But so one day Mr. Wrong was perfect, like amazing, on top of the world, and the next day he is the biggest asshole in the world, like just an absolute total. And this could be down to whether he's text or not, right? Which is just ridiculous. This could be down to something small, like a non-text, or an off kind of day. He's having an off day, so he's a bit rude, or he needs to escape from, because a lot of men go away from talking when they're in a bad mood. So he's not necessarily thinking about my needs in that moment. So now suddenly he is Mr. Wrong. Now we're putting all this emphasis on this one person to fulfill us, right? And right, you might, so maybe Mr. Wrong is a cheater, or he is someone who is, I don't know, unavailable, emotionally unavailable, I don't know, something like that. First of all, if that's the case, then being with something like that and being attracted to someone like that, it means that we don't really feel okay in ourselves. We really need someone else. So even though we can see that's not going to happen here, we kind of try and make them be something. And it's actually our problem. Like, we're the selfish motherfuckers here, not them, because they're like just being a human being. And we're putting all this expectation on about us, like how they should be treating us. But if we treated ourselves with that same level of respect, then we probably wouldn't be with them in the first place. Because if we really saw that we don't need anyone, these weird behaviours that kind of draw us in would look really unattractive, because it would just cause drama, it would cause complication, and you would see through it as insecurity, which is actually quite unattractive. So what I mean is when we are lost in our own thinking that a man can give us happiness, we're more likely to attract a certain an idea of a Mr. Wrong, because no one can match up to the expectation that is in your head. Like, we can't, how would we possibly, how this ideal specialness that we attach to what a relationship is this Prince Charming, no one can match up to that, because it's not a human thing, it's just a thought. It's an imaginary ideal where this one person really hasn't got anything else going on in his life apart from to be your Prince Charming. And now if you imagine someone who was only there to pander to your needs, and only there to allow you to heal, and only there for you to get the instant gratification from them, then we wouldn't like them at all anyway, because that's the kind of needy guy that we actually hate. So basically, when we see that whatever that person is doing, if we're happy in ourselves, if we understand that we're not affected, it's our thinking that creates the problem. Because how many times have literally the situation is the same, I'm in a bad mood and he looks like horrible, and the next time in a really good mood, then I'm really forgiving and really loving, and he's suddenly this really sweet person again. So it's not him, it's me that changes. And when we think that it's anything other than thought, we do become a victim, and hence why we call them Mr. Wrong, because we're putting the emphasis on them, not ourselves.
Yeah, and we're going back to the idea of expectations, expecting them to give us something they physically can't give, and it's I mean, it's an innocent misunderstanding on both parts, and you know, in the fluctuations of the relationship, one will be needier than the other, and then vice versa, and it will probably like move around a bit, but it's always just a misunderstanding about where our power is and where our experience comes from. It's, you know, you're saying like we're selfish if we're kind of expecting that man to kind of do all those things and kind of complete our lives. But it's kind of understandable if that's truly where we believe that our source of happiness is, and when that shifts, when you realise the true source of your happiness, and you experience something from knowing that you are literally feeling your thoughts moment to moment, you can just disregard some of those insecure, obsessive thoughts about that guy, and those thoughts just kind of drop away. Actually, they drop away quite naturally, and you're left with a spacious, loving feeling within that is so powerful and beautiful, and bigger than anything you felt from another person, that it kind of, you naturally realize that person isn't going to, you don't need that person to behave in a certain way to give you that feeling, because that feeling is always there moment to moment. When the insecure thinking drops away, your peace of mind returns. And I think with relationships, I mean, I've kind of been around this understanding for a few years now, but there's one area that I'm less likely to see it, and that's in relationships, as in, for me personally, and it will be different for someone else, I can feel extremes of emotion, so extreme, so physically palpable within my body, that I completely forget that it's associated with thought in the moment. It just feels so powerful and all-consuming, and all I can do is actually focus on it rather than understanding how I'm actually generating my experience. So it's understandable that when we get upset and we've got all these physical sensations go through our body, that we look externally and go, well, that person there is the culprit. But because we're living moment to moment, there's a hope with this understanding. There's a real hope with this understanding that the next moment things might be different. The next moment things might, and the next moment things will be different. And mental health and clarity and wisdom is really literally that close, like a moment away. And that really goes against like traditional kind of psychotherapy, which is all about, it takes years to sort of evolve through a painful experience. And it's actually, we're always, that mental health is always there. However lost you feel right now, however it feels like a million miles away, however he feels like the biggest bastard in the world and it happens again and again, and why does this keep happening, and it's a pattern, and la la la. However much that feels true, you have got mental health and love and peace there, moment to moment. And this understanding helps that shine through.
Yeah, it does. It does. And this is what I mean. This is why it's difficult to put this across in words, in us talking, because it is an understanding. It is a penny drop situation. So with Mr. Wrong, it's like you're probably going to keep perceiving these people as wrong, because when we get upset with their behaviour or etc., we do think it's them. And because they're upsetting us, I think this is where it goes completely up the wall. Like, there is this idea that the right one won't upset you, right? But actually, the right one, I think, comes when you're in a good place, because you are without need, you're unattached, And Marianne Williamson says, she says that our job is not in a relationship, is not to attach. It's to detach. That's the growth. That's where the growth is. Now, I know that's not talking in exactly the same context, but it's the same thing. Because when you know that your feelings are coming from your thinking and that the upset is coming from a perception of the problem, of a situation as a problem in that moment, not like for the rest of your life. And that's why we do go up and down in relationships. Like, how could I think that before? Like, I remember, getting really, really so upset, feeling so justified by it, and feeling so like adamant, I am never going to speak to this person again, like completely done with it. And then like 3 hours later, completely changed. Now, he hasn't changed. He is the same person, probably not even thinking about this. And I have changed. So he's the constant to a certain extent, and I am the variable. Now, it's not to say that they don't do things when they're upset or when they're not behaving correctly, but there is this thing. It's like, we don't get attached to a friend, right? We don't worry if a friend, doesn't pick up the phone or doesn't pander to our every need, or isn't available that day suddenly. Like, it has no bearing on who we are. And we can see that in a friendship. But at some point, I think, and this is where we have been fed over the years, conditioned that a man will make us happy, that man will make us happy. And actually, that's a complete load of bollocks. It just does not work that way. It can't work that way. And so we're relying on him to do that. So when we go into it, when we meet these people, these new men, there's nothing to do, because this is an understanding. It's not a doing. You can't change by changing your behaviour. It has to be an internal understanding that whatever this guy does can't actually affect me. My thinking about him is the only thing that affects me. And we do get incredibly emotional. But I wonder, life tests us. It's growth. We grow. We feel stuff so we can learn, so we can grow from it. Now, if we're never going to grow from that emotional experience with a guy, if we're always blaming the guy, we keep going back round and round the same pattern with the same people, because we think that they're the problem. As soon as we look at ourselves as the perceiving being the problem, because there's no such thing as Mr. Wrong or Mr. Right. It's just a complete idea that we use, so it flies out our mouth constantly. And it's just another concept. It's just another idea that society has adopted as true. And so stop seeing. I think the ultimate doing here is coming to terms with the fact that there's no such thing as Mr. Wrong or Mr. Right. There's only a such thing as painful perception, or loving perception, or angry perception in the moment. And whenever you're thinking about that man, he will reflect that. He will be that to you. He will seem like the problem, or he will seem like the happiness.
And I loved what you were saying about he can't actually touch who you are. Like, whatever his behaviour, whatever you're thinking, whatever you're insecure thinking in the moment, he cannot touch who you are. is actually you are someone of immense power and resilience, and it's just a misunderstanding that once it's cleared away, it's like you could get a glimpse of that untouchable essence that is always free and always love.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope that helps. Really enjoyed it again. It's funny how we don't know where it's going to go, these conversations, and then we always get back to the same thing. I love that. Right, see you later.
Thanks, Lucy. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And if you'd like to contact us, our email addresses are lucy@lucyforlife.com and jo@jo-monday.com. Thanks very much.